Rushing to the wedding, I bought flowers from a little girl selling them by the roadside. But before the registry office, I found a note inside and called everything off. "Son, are you almost there?" This was Mom's third call. "Yes, Mom, don't worry, I'm on time." "Oh, Paul, only you could do something like this, go on a business trip right before your own wedding." "Mom, don't make a big deal out of it. It was a very important business trip for the benefit of our clinic. You should be thinking about your wedding and your beautiful bride, but you're all about the clinic." "Who did you take after?" Mom sighed. "All right, keep your eyes on the road and don't be late." Paul Gill had been working in the pediatric clinic's cardiology department for about 2 years. Their head doctor was a fanatic about his work. He cared for his department like it was his own child, doing his utmost to equip it with the latest technology. No one asked him to, it wasn't part of his duties, but Mr. Hawkins was dedicated to the cause. Children need to be treated in the best possible way. Children are our future, and what that future will be like depends only on us, the adults, said Mr. Hawkins. No one dared to argue with him. When he hired Paul, he immediately recognized a kindred spirit. The young man clearly had the same outlook on life and on his work. The head doctor wasn't wrong, they worked together exceptionally well. "I couldn't find a better replacement for myself," Dr. Hawkins once said, patting Paul on the shoulder. "And I couldn't find a better teacher and mentor," Paul replied with a smile. That day, Paul Gill was returning from a business trip. He had to travel to a nearby city to negotiate the delivery of new equipment. Mr. Hawkins would have gone himself, but he had caught a severe case of tonsillitis and was bedridden with a high fever. The meeting couldn't be postponed, so despite the upcoming celebration, Paul went on the trip. "Damn, I don't even have a bouquet," Paul cursed. "I meant to order one in advance, but work has been so hectic." At that moment, he saw a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She was sitting on an overturned crate, with a bucket of small bouquets of wildflowers in front of her. Paul slowed down. "Hi there, sweetheart, are you selling these flowers?" he asked her. "Yes, sir. They're fresh. I picked them early this morning. Aren't you scared being here alone? This is a busy road." "No, sir. People here are just like us," the girl shrugged. "I'll take this one, with the forget-me-nots," Paul said, pointing to a bouquet in the middle of the bucket. He handed her a $10 bill. The girl looked up at him with her sky-blue eyes. "Take them all," she said. "No, I only need one, honey. Use the money to treat yourself and be happy for me. Today is a happy day for me." "Thank you, sir. I'll pray for your health," she said in a mature, almost grandmotherly way. Paul stepped on the gas. Time was running out, and he still needed to go home, take a shower, and change. There weren't many people in front of the registry office. Paul and Jessica didn't want a lavish celebration. They just wanted to be together, that was all. Their parents, however, especially Paul's, were eager for the wedding celebration as he was their only son. They were waiting for the bride and the Gills to arrive. Paul stood in the shade of an old tree, idly examining his bouquet. Suddenly, he noticed a piece of paper folded several times inside. Probably some trash got in there, he thought, pulling out the paper. No, it wasn't trash. The notebook paper had been deliberately folded and placed in the bouquet. The groom unfolded his find. "Thank you for buying. You will save me from the orphanage. Samantha." A chill ran down Paul's spine, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He knew all too well what an orphanage was like. As a child, he had spent several years in one until he was adopted by the Gills. Paul's parents had died in a plane crash when he was about 4 years old. He remembered how every Christmas the children wrote letters to Santa, asking for kind and loving parents who would love them more than anything, kiss them goodnight, read them stories, and sing lullabies. Paul wanted that too. He folded his letters the same way and hung them on the tree. The caregivers helped the kids make special boxes to send their letters to Santa Claus. One autumn day, Paul Webster's dream came true. He was called to the orphanage director's office, where Angela and Christopher Gill were waiting for him. They smiled and immediately gave him a gift, a large, colorful box of building blocks. "You can play with your friends," the woman with kind, sparkling eyes said, brushing away a tear. Her hair was pinned up. "Will you be my mom and dad?" Little Paul asked hopefully. He was about to turn 7. "Yes, my dear," Angela warmly embraced the boy and kissed the top of his head. "But we'll have to wait a bit," the man in the business suit said in a quiet, soothing voice. A few months later, Paul was living with the Gills. By now, they couldn't imagine that Paul wasn't their biological son, and Paul himself had come to love his adoptive parents with all his heart. The little girl, Samantha, was selling wildflowers she picked at dawn, then sitting by the road in the scorching sun. All to avoid ending up in an orphanage. Paul didn't know, nor could he know, why the girl was at risk of ending up there or how those few dollars she earned selling bouquets would help her, but he firmly decided he had to help her. Right now. "Nancy, dear, give this bouquet to Jess," Paul approached his fiancée's friend. "I'll explain everything later, okay? I need to leave urgently. It's a matter of life and death. Tell Jessica I love her very much and that we will definitely get married just a bit later." "Paul, I don't understand," the girl said in confusion. "Where are you going? What about your wedding?" Paul was speeding towards the edge of the city, then he rushed onto the highway. He was very afraid of being too late. Samantha might have already gone home. How would he find her then? What if she was taken to an orphanage? No, that couldn't be allowed. She was such a sweet girl. She deserved a happy life. He would do anything to make sure of that. Fortunately, Samantha was still sitting on her overturned crate. The bucket had one last bouquet of yellow and orange flowers left. Paul hit the brakes. He jumped out of the car and approached the girl. "Sam, I'm so glad I made it." Paul squatted down and looked into the little girl's sky blue eyes. "Do you want to buy another bouquet?" the girl asked with a smile. "No, Tell me, why do they want to send you to an orphanage? Where are your parents?" "Granny Mary is not allowed to raise me because she's too old," Samantha sighed sadly. "And my mom," her voice trembled, "my mom drowned in the swamp last fall. My God, how terrible. Poor thing. But tell me, why are you selling these flowers?" "I want to save up a lot of money and give it to the lady who wants to take me to the orphanage so she'll let me stay with Granny. I really don't want to go to the orphanage." Tears streamed down the little girl's cheeks, flushed from the heat and anxiety. "You won't go to the orphanage, I promise," Paul said firmly, taking Samantha's hand. The girl squeezed his hand in return and cried even harder. "Don't cry, little one, don't cry." Paul ran his hand through her soft hair, tousled by the wind. "Shall we go to your home? Where do you live?" "A mile from here. In Green Oasis Village." "Wow. What a lovely name. Makes you want to live there. It must be beautiful there, right?" "Yes, it's very beautiful. The village is small, the forest is nearby. That's where I pick the flowers in the mornings." "And then you walk a whole mile to sell them?" "Uh-huh," the girl nodded, climbing into the back seat of Paul's car. "You're a very brave girl," Paul said admiringly, "and very determined. You deserve the happiest life." They entered the old, time-worn house. Granny, everything's going to be okay. Kind Paul Gill is going to help us." A neat old lady with a headscarf peeked out of her room. "Hello, ma'am," Paul greeted her. "Hello," the elderly woman responded, slightly scared. She must have been around 80. "Would you like some tea?" Samantha cheerfully offered. I wouldn't say no. It's more fun to talk over tea." They drank tea in a small, cozy kitchen with semi-transparent curtains the color of fresh grass. "Where are you from?" Mary Booth asked, carefully slicing an apple pie. "Why does Sammy say you can help us?" "Today I bought a bouquet of wildflowers from your granddaughter." "Sammy is my great-granddaughter, sir." "Sorry, from your great-granddaughter on the highway." "How many times have I told this rascal not to do that?" "People are different. There are some very bad ones who can hurt or, worse, steal her. But she got it into her head that this way she can stay with me. She plans to bribe the Child Protection Services. Can you imagine?" Granny laughed softly. "How can you bribe them? The law is the law, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm too old to take guardianship of Samantha, too old." Paul looked at her. The old lady had tears in her eyes, but she tried to joke and speak cheerfully. "And Sam's mom? What happened to her?" "My granddaughter disappeared, and then they found her jacket caught on a branch. She got stuck in the swamp. That's what the investigator said. That swamp has claimed dozens of lives. It looks like forest floor. After Sissy was declared dead, they immediately put up signs so no one else would get caught. I don't know why they did it only after her death." The old lady sighed and poured Paul more tea. "My God, how sad." Paul pinched the bridge of his nose. "And that's why they want to take Sammy to the orphanage, right?" "Yes, there's no one to take care of her, and I'm just an old wreck. Don't worry. I'll do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. I promise. I know what it's like to live in an orphanage. I still can't believe my sissy is gone. She said something so strange then, the day before she disappeared." "What did she say?" Paul looked at the old lady intently. "She asked me to take care of Sammy if something happened to her." Granny Mary sniffled and adjusted the headscarf that had slipped to the side. "She probably felt that something bad was going to happen to her." Paul was silent. He didn't quite know what to do. He couldn't think of anything better than to call his friend Bob. Bob was a very good lawyer. "Bob, buddy, don't ask me too many questions right now. I'll explain everything later," Paul quickly said after dialing his friend's number. "Paul, what the hell? Why did you run away from your own wedding?" "Bob, not now, please. There's this girl. She might be taken to an orphanage. We need to do something, and fast, right now. Can you come to Green Oasis Village? I'll send the address." "All right, Paul. You always find adventures for yourself. Okay, send the address. Jess wants to come with me." "Fine, let her come. I'll explain everything to her too. Tell her I love her very much." Paul hung up. About 40 minutes later, the door to the house burst open and they came in, Bob and Jessica. Jess still had white wedding flowers woven into her hair, although she had already changed into jeans and a t-shirt with a funny cactus on it. She looked worried and confused. "Sissy, is that you?" Granny Mary clutched her heart. "Mom." Sam rushed to Jess and hugged her. Bob and Paul exchanged glances. They had no idea what was going on. "Mrs. Booth, are you all right?" Paul asked, running to the elderly woman. "Granny." Jessica was crying and hugging Samantha while looking at the old lady. "Forgive me. I wanted to protect you. Jack. He threatened to kill me. He's out of prison." Jessica had a hard time speaking. She was holding her daughter close, and beads of sweat appeared on her pale face. "Who is Jack?" Paul couldn't hold back. "What's going on here? Is Sam your daughter?" "Yes, Paul, forgive me. I didn't tell you about it. I was very scared." "Let's all calm down," interrupted Jessica, a sensible Bob, "and you'll tell us everything. Then we'll see what to do." Grandma poured tea for her granddaughter, and she began to tell what had happened a few months ago. Jessica Rose was coming home from work. She worked at the local post office. "What a meeting!" she heard very close to her. She looked up. Jess often walked with her head down. As long as she could see the road, she thought there was no need to look at anything else. She stood face to face with Jack White. What are you doing here? Jessica, pale, barely managed to say. I came to visit you, my doll, the man with raven black hair said, baring his teeth like a wild animal. Were you released? Early? Yes, baby, they reduced my sentence for good behavior. Are you happy? He roughly grabbed her hand. Leave me alone. Jessica tried to break free, but Jack White's hand felt like iron. No, you won't get away that easily. Have you forgotten what happened almost 8 years ago, huh? But I haven't forgotten. Jessica was scared. The man's eyes were full of hatred. It would be nothing for this man to kill her. He was probably even ready to go back behind bars just to take revenge on her. It happened almost 8 years ago. It was late July. The young people in the village loved to gather by the lake. That evening Jessica Rose was there too. She rarely went to parties, she had no time for that. Right after school, she had to get a job. Her mother was seriously ill, and her grandmother was already old. Jess didn't know her father. Your father, my dear granddaughter, is like a male mosquito, her grandmother used to say. Why? Little Jess asked in amazement. Because all he was good for was making you, and nothing else. Jessica didn't ask any more questions. She didn't want to upset her mother, and she didn't need to know. That evening, her friend begged Jess to go with her to the lake. She had a crush on a visiting guy and wanted to get to know him. For some reason, silly Peggy hoped she would win his heart and he would take her to the city where they would live happily and richly. But things turned out quite differently. Yes, Peggy met the handsome Jack White, but he started paying attention not to her but to her friend Jessica Rose, even though she had no interest in romantic relationships. Girls, want some champagne? Jack asked the friends, holding a bottle of sparkling wine. I don't mind, Peggy said sweetly. No, not for me, Jess crossed her arms. Come on, Jess, don't be so uptight, her friend nudged her in the side. They only drank one plastic cup each. Jessica didn't feel much, but something strange began to happen to her friend. She literally started falling asleep on her feet. We need to get Peggy home, Jess said worriedly. No problem, let's take her, Jack offered to help. What's wrong with her? Is it really the champagne? Unlikely, Jack lifted the almost asleep girl onto his shoulder, and they started walking. Peggy lived very close to the lake. Maybe she took something before? No, we came to the lake together. She didn't drink anything. You can ask her when she wakes up, Jack smiled. Jessie, let's take a walk away from these idiots, Jack suggested after they took care of Peggy. You know, I'd better go home. I have to get up early tomorrow, the girl began to decline. Come on, we won't be long. He took her hand. Jessica felt a shiver run through her body. At 17, she still didn't know what it was like to date a guy. The girl really wanted to continue her studies and become a translator, but fate decided otherwise. She had to forget about her career when her mother got sick. She had to support the whole family, and there was never enough money for anything. Jack, I really have to go, Jessica said quietly. You'll make it. Let me treat you to the best ice cream in the world. The ice cream in our village is pretty ordinary, and the kiosk is already closed. My aunt makes it herself. Come on. It's late. Aren't you afraid of waking her up? Nah, she sleeps with earplugs to avoid the neighbors' roosters, Jack laughed out loud. The ice cream was indeed incredibly tasty. Oh, there's mango syrup, Jack said cheerfully, taking a small bottle of orange liquid from the cabinet. Want some? Uh-huh, Jessica nodded, licking the spoon. You're so beautiful, Jack said softly, and the next moment he was kissing her. His kiss was passionate and demanding. Jess didn't even have time to react to resist this persistent guy. They lay on a mattress from the bed, thrown directly on the floor. You're such a sweetie, Jess. I'm glad we managed to get rid of your friend. It's great that I happen to have some sleeping powder. What? You drugged Peggy? Jess sat up on her elbow. Well, sorry, baby, she was too pushy, and I wanted to be with you. I have to go. Jess stood up abruptly, throwing on her sundress. Where are you going? We had such a good time together. It was good for you, not for me. It was painful and disgusting for me, the girl said. Then get out. If you don't know how to enjoy intimacy, go read your books. The guys were right, there's nothing to catch with you. Jessica was choking with resentment and anger. How could she trust this arrogant city guy who only wanted one thing from her? She wished she hadn't gone to the lake, that she had stayed home. The next day Jessica reported Jack White. She didn't care what people would say about her in the village. She wanted to punish this man who thought he was the king of the universe. In the end, Jack was imprisoned. Other sins of his were uncovered, so the guy went behind bars for 11 whole years. Jessica was afraid he might come back for revenge. She hoped that by the time this scumbag was released, she would be living far away from her hometown, but that didn't happen. First, her mother died, and then Jess found out she was pregnant. She wanted to get rid of the baby, but at the very last moment, she changed her mind. Yes, it was Jack White's child, this slippery guy, but the baby wasn't to blame. Jess couldn't take the life of this little creature that had formed in her womb. Life was hard. Grandma had to take care of little Sammy, and Jess still worked at the post office. It was a relief they hadn't fired her yet. Almost everyone in the village pointed at Jessica Rose and whispered that she had put the guy behind bars because he refused to marry her. It's hard to imagine how many spiteful tongues exist in this world. Jess had to silently endure all this. She needed to survive and feed her grandmother and daughter. And then Jack White reappeared in her life. You will pay for everything, Jack hissed, drawing his face close to hers. It's because of you I spent my best years behind bars. It's because of you I couldn't even say goodbye to my mother when she was dying. You should have thought of that earlier, you scoundrel. Jessica hissed back. You probably expected me to beg you for another unforgettable night, right? Well, know this, you were a terrible lover. Jessica tried to break free again. Jack dragged her somewhere. Unfortunately, the street was deserted. It was October, and it was raining intermittently, windy, and nasty. Few wanted to be outside in such heavenly weather. They stood not far from the swamp. What do you want from me? Jess asked, very frightened. I want you to beg for forgiveness. On your knees. You're sick, Jack, the girl said with a disgusted grimace. Then he hit her in the face. Pain shot through her entire being, and circles swam before her eyes. Suddenly, Jess grabbed a thick stick and struck Jack on the head with all her might. He staggered and fell right at her feet. Good riddance, bastard. Jessica kicked him with the toe of her boot. Then the girl took a desperate step. She took off her jacket and headed to the swamp. Carefully, so as not to stumble, she smeared it with mud and then hung it on a branch so that it lightly touched the swampy mire. Just in case, she also took off her watch and threw it on the forest path leading to this very wretched place. Jessica ran along the highway until a kind old man picked her up and took her to the city. There, the poor girl's new life began. She immediately found a job as a cleaner in a hair salon. Everything worked out with housing, too. Nancy, a hairdresser, suggested they share an apartment. They quickly became friends and best pals. And then Jess met the man of her dreams, Paul Gill. That's my simple story, Jessica said with a sigh. Jess, but why didn't you tell me about Samantha right away? We would have come here immediately and... I was scared, Paul, very scared. Jack White is capable of anything. What if he did something? This way, it wasn't advantageous for him to show up. They could have nabbed him, accusing him of my death, she sobbed. Yes, I acted dishonestly. I wanted to get married first and then tell everything. Jessica, but does that mean you wanted this wedding just because it was convenient for you? You don't love me, do you? Paul, darling, what are you saying? When I met you, I couldn't even believe right away that you were so perfect for me. I thought men like you only existed in beautiful books and good movies. But no, you were real. I love you very much." Paul moved closer to the girl and took her hand. "Shoo, it's okay, sunshine. I love you very much too. You must be bored with me? I mean, I only have a high school education." "Jess, stop it, it doesn't matter. You're very smart. I wouldn't have thought you only finished school. I read a lot. Whenever I had time, I spent it reading," Jessica said through her tears. "You'll get the profession of your dreams, I promise," Paul said confidently. "Shall we go home?" "Wait, Paul. I can't leave Grandma here alone. Let's stay here with Sammy tonight. Tomorrow I'll call you. I'll think about how we should live on." "What's there to think about, Jessie? We'll take Mrs. Booth with us." "Why are you so formal, Paul?" The old lady smiled, and her cheeks wrinkled with crow's feet. "I'm just Grandma Mary." "Got it, Grandma Mary," Paul smiled back. Paul and Bob left, leaving the girls of different ages in the village until tomorrow. Jessica was going to sort through her things and old photos she wanted to take with her. "Granny," Jess asked before bed, "where is Jack White now? Do you know anything about it?" "I only know he was in some clinic." His aunt didn't say directly, but as the neighbors understood, he was in a mental hospital. "I don't know if he's still there or not. His aunt moved to the city, to his mother's apartment. What happened next, I can't say." Jessica slept very poorly. She kept waking up, listening for something. What she wanted to hear, only God knew. Just as dawn was breaking, Jessica woke up again and realized she couldn't fall asleep anymore. Then the girl got up, pulled on her jeans and a t-shirt, and quietly left the house. It smelled of freshness and young greenery. Silence wrapped the village like a soft, fluffy blanket. Her legs led Jess to the swamp, where last October she had thrown her jacket to simulate her death. The girl suddenly stopped, on the grass, at the very edge of the quagmire that shamelessly pretended to be a continuation of the forest path, sat a hunched old man. Looking closely, Jessica realized that he was not an old man, but a man worn down by life. His hair was graying, he was thin, in a worn windbreaker. Jessica stopped behind a tree so he couldn't see her. Suddenly she heard some indistinct muttering. The man was talking to himself and crying. Yes, this man was crying, sobbing, and sniffling. A wasted life. And all because of her. I wanted her love so much, dreamed of her affection, but never got it. And now what? A man with a criminal record and a certificate from a mental hospital? Why did that girl jump into the swamp? It would have been better if she had stayed alive. At least that wouldn't be on my conscience. Jess stood as if thunderstruck. It was Jack White. She never would have guessed that this guy could turn into such a miserable, even pathetic person who had lost all hope for a bright future. "Jack," the girl called, "I didn't die in the swamp that night." The young man turned sharply. Horror was evident in his eyes. "You came for me, didn't you? You want me to sink into the swamp muck too, don't you? Well, I'm ready. I have nothing left to wait for in this life." "Jack, I didn't die," the young woman said calmly, standing still to avoid frightening him even more. "Jessica Rose? Is that you? You didn't die that evening here in this cursed swamp? But everyone said. You were declared dead." "I know, I threw my jacket then and ran to the city. I was afraid that you would kill me and my daughter and grandmother." Jack White was silent, staring at Jess and occasionally blinking his large brown eyes with dark long lashes. "I'm sorry, Jack," Jessica suddenly said, her eyes moist with tears. "If I hadn't reported you then, maybe your life would have turned out differently." The girl took a few steps toward the swamp. "I hate her." Jack clasped his head in his hands. "I spent my whole childhood trying to earn her love, to get even a drop of her attention, but no. All she cared about was the theater and her numerous admirers." "Who are you talking about?" Jessica asked quietly, sitting on the grass next to him. My mother. She never loved me. She gave birth to me because it was too late for an abortion. She told me that herself. At first, I tried to be a good boy, studied, behaved well, listened to her and everything, but it didn't work, Jess, it didn't work. Mother didn't care. Having a son like that was convenient because he didn't cause trouble, didn't require any special attention. Then I changed tactics and turned from a good boy to a bad one. The school called her in, demanding she take care of her son, give him more maternal love. But how can you give maternal love if there is none, absolutely none, understand? Jessica listened attentively. This self-absorbed dandy was revealing a completely different side of himself. It turned out he had a very vulnerable soul. But, Jess, that didn't work either. Mother threatened me, said if I didn't stop causing trouble, she'd send me to an orphanage. That's when I realized I needed to get out of the house as soon as possible. But getting off the bad boy path turned out to be very difficult for some reason. Yet I've always had a knack for math. Teachers predicted a great future for me. They were wrong. Jack, forgive me if you can. I was so angry at you then. My mom was 1 foot in the grave. I had an old grandmother to take care of. And Peggy was mad at me, accusing me of stealing her dream guy. She dragged me to the lake just to meet you there. She dreamed of dating you. Silly village girl Peggy. Jessica sighed and looked into the distance. I really wanted to spend the evening with you, Jack smiled bitterly, glancing at the girl. I literally lost my head. I tried everything to get rid of that friend of yours. She looked at me as if expecting me to marry her right there at the lake. Yes, it would have been better if I hadn't gone to that cursed lake that night. I often told myself that too. Jessica looked at Jack and then averted her gaze again. I was so angry at you then, like never before. I wasn't even afraid that the entire village would point fingers at me. My granny and I had a hard time. Everyone had something nasty to say about the wayward granddaughter. I thought I wouldn't survive. But then my Samantha was born. Whose daughter is she? Were you seeing someone? No, of course not. We barely survived, and no one would have wanted to date me. Jess, I don't understand. Samantha, your daughter, is she mine? Jessica was silent. She didn't even understand why she had started this conversation. So many years of fearing meeting this person, then living in constant tension for months that something might happen to her grandmother or daughter, and now just taking and pouring out everything that was on her mind. God, what an idiot I am. Jack clasped his head in his hands again. If it weren't for me then. You might be happy now. But I am happy, Jack. Not long ago, I met the man of my dreams. If it weren't for that meeting with you, I'd never have met Paul Gill, never have known true love. They were silent for a while, each thinking about their own things. Jack, I want you to be happy too, Jessica suddenly said. Alas, that's impossible, Jack shrugged. No, it is possible, believe me. You need to start with a confession. We have a wonderful priest in our village. Father Benjamin will surely help you. He's helped me many times. Everyone turned away, but he listened to me and gave good advice. Let me take you to him right now, the girl said fervently. I'm afraid, Jess, no one can help me now, not even a priest. You're wrong. You're young. You still have a chance. Don't bury yourself alive, I beg you. Thank you, Jess. You really are an extraordinary girl. I've done you so much harm, and you, if anything, I've done you no less harm. So we're even, Jessica smiled slightly. All right, honey, I agree. I'll go to your father Benjamin. Let him tear me apart. For the first time, Jack smiled. I feel much better after talking to you. It's like a weight off my shoulders. I'm not such a scoundrel as I might seem. I realized that, Jack. I realized it when I saw you here today. They talked a little longer, then went their separate ways. Jessica felt relieved. Still, she was uneasy about putting the guy behind bars. After all, he didn't rape her back then, though he was excessively persistent. Now she hoped that this boy, unloved by his mother, would fare much better than before. "Where have you been?" her grandmother asked anxiously when the girl returned home. It turned out she had been sitting by the swamp for about 2.5 hours. "Just went for a walk," Jess replied. She decided not to tell anyone anything to avoid unnecessary worry. "Jessie, I'm afraid I can't live there in the city. I was born and raised here. I don't have much time left. I'd like to spend my remaining days in my own home." "Grandma, why are you burying yourself already? You'll still get to see Sammy get married." "I don't want to get married," the girl intervened. "I want to go to the amusement park. Kind Paul Gill said he'd definitely take me there. He said it's very fun and interesting." "If Paul Gill said so, then that's how it'll be," Jess patted her daughter on the back. "Mom, he'll be my dad, right? I mean, when he marries you. Do you want that, Bunny?" "Yes, I do. Paul is kind, handsome, and he has a cool car." Jessica and Grandma Mary burst out laughing. "But it's true," the girl pouted slightly. Several years had passed since Jessica last saw Jack White in the forest by the swamp. She, her daughter, and Paul lived in a small but very sturdy and cozy house not far from Paul's parents' home. Angela and Christopher Gill warmly welcomed Samantha and loved her as their own granddaughter. They spoiled her and often gave her gifts. Jessica decided against studying to be a translator and became a child psychologist. She got a job at a children's development center. She was so adept at connecting with any child that parents were amazed at how she did it, and the results Jessica Gill achieved in a short time astonished them. Grandma Mary refused to move to the city and continued living in the village. Jessica visited her very often. After all, age could bring unexpected issues, and she might need help at any moment. Grandma was always very happy when her family came to visit. Paul's parents also often dropped by to see the old lady and delight her with some treats. They even considered moving to the village when Christopher retired. It was so nice and peaceful there. In short, it was a green haven. One day, a mother with a little boy came to see Jessica. When they entered, Jess gasped. Standing before her was her old friend Peggy. "Peggy," she asked, staring in surprise at the woman. "Jess? Is that you?" The old friend rushed to hug her. They agreed that Jessica would visit them after work. It turned out Peggy had become Jack White's wife. They met a few days after Jessica's conversation with him at the swamp. "Did he really go to Father Benjamin?" Jessica smiled, inhaling the aroma of the herbal tea Peggy had made for her. "Yes, Jack told me about your meeting at the swamp and how it turned his life around 180 degrees. I'm so happy for you, Peggy. Remember when we went to the lake, you kept saying you'd get your way and become the wife of that city heartthrob?" Jess laughed and covered her friend's hand with hers. "I missed you so much, Peggy." "I missed you too. But back then, I was angry at the whole world and went to my aunt's to avoid seeing you or anyone from our village. But I missed you, your advice, and your wise thoughts from all those books you read." Peggy looked warmly at her rediscovered friend. "How is Jack? Where does he work?" "Can you believe it? He went back to university and became a mathematician. He worked wherever he could, even as a pizza delivery guy. Now he teaches at a school for juvenile delinquents. He says he wants to guide the boys onto the right path." "That's wonderful. I'm so happy for him and for you, for both of you. Let's be family friends." "I'm in." Peggy's eyes sparkled. It was an important day. Grandma Mary was turning 85. They went to celebrate with the whole crowd in 3 cars, both the Gill families and the White family. They decided to have a barbecue party. Grandma welcomed the guests on the porch of her renovated house. After the repairs, it had transformed from a shabby place into a little gem. There was also a cozy gazebo where the big family loved to gather. Everyone was busy with their own tasks. The men were completely engrossed in preparing meat over the fire, while the women set the table, cut vegetables, and prepared various appetizers. Samantha was looking after little Ben White, who was running all around the yard, and she was trying to catch up with him, exhausted, but both of them were having fun. "Have you thought about having a baby?" Peggy asked while she and Jessica were washing fruits in the kitchen. "You know, we haven't really had time for that. But Paul brings it up now and then." "Jess, can you imagine? I'm pregnant again." Her friend looked a bit bewildered. "Wow. How did Jack take the news?" "I haven't told him yet. I'm afraid it's too soon. Ben is still so little." "Oh, come on. It's the perfect time. The Lord always knows when to give a child and to whom." "Girls, where are you?" Angela Gill burst into the kitchen, chattering away. "We're coming," the friends answered in unison. "I want to make a toast." Jack stood up from his seat. "Our grandmother Mary is like a wise oak among different aspens and birches. You unite us all and have taught each of us something over the years. May your heart keep beating to the rhythm of the dance. Live long and stay the same kind and mischievous granny. Cheers." Everyone raised their glasses and shouted in unison. "Cheers." "Thank you, my dear. Thank you all, kids." Grandma Mary was ready to cry but held back. "Now I can die in peace. Everyone is doing well." "Stop that," Jessica protested. "Who promised to see her great-granddaughter get married?" Everyone started chatting cheerfully, trying different dishes. Suddenly, a roll of thunder echoed across the sky. It was so loud that everyone jumped, and little Ben started crying. "Don't cry, son," Jack said cheerfully. "Nature is celebrating that our Granny Mary was born on this day. When good people have birthdays, it often rains and thunders. It's like a salute." "Is that true, Jack?" Samantha stared at him. "Of course, Sammy, it's absolutely true." At that moment, large drops of rain began to drum on the metal roof of the gazebo. Ben stopped crying and looked up at the ceiling with curiosity, listening to the cheerful drumming of the playful raindrops. "How wonderful that I was scared of Jack back then and ran away to the city. There I met my Paul. And how marvelous that on that dawn morning we met again in the swamp and talked. Now they, Jack and Peggy, are so happy." Jessica's thoughts swirled in her head. "Jess, did you fall asleep?" Her husband's voice pulled her out of her reverie. "Huh?" She looked up at him. "Jack and Peggy are having another baby. Let's drink to that." "Let's." Jessica raised her champagne-filled glass. "Oh, look!" Samantha exclaimed, peeking out the big window. "A rainbow." Indeed, a stunningly beautiful rainbow stretched across the entire sky. A rainbow always means happiness. So, everyone sitting at that big table would be happy in their own way. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.